The podcast that floats down here.
Hi, I'm Melissa, your Stephen King veteran.
Hi, I'm Ben, the Stephen King and horror film fanboy.
And hello, I'm Luke, your first-time Stephen King reader.
Bill, unlike the others, didn't see Pennywise that afternoon, but he did see a ghost. As Bill walked up Witcham Street, he found the drain where Georgie had met his demise. After taunting nothing in the drain, he's approached by a young boy with a skateboard. The two talk about voices in the drains, and the boy admits to hearing them. First a child's voice, then a man's, near the pumping station down in the Barrens. Then again, the voice of a girl while he was taking a bath. Bill tells the boy he heard the voices too a long time ago, and the two began to discuss the kids who've recently died. The boy admits to being friends with Johnny Fury, who's dead, and also tells of another friend, Tommy, being convinced he saw Jaws swimming up the canal, and Bill admitted he believed he probably had. After saying goodbye to the boy, Bill continued his walk, passing his old home, however decided not to bother the new family living there, and proceeded on running into a young girl who, when asked, tells him about the best store, secondhand rose, secondhand clothes. Bill heads that way and is struck by a ghost he sees in the window. As he enters the shop, a phrase suddenly pops into his head.
He thrusts his fist against the post and still insists he sees the ghost.
As the line plays over and over in his head, Bill has trouble letting the shopkeeper know what he's been looking for. Finally, the chorus in his head ends and Bill is able to make his purchase. He gives Mike a ring to make sure he can keep it at his house. As Bill left the shop, some people gawked, but he didn't care. He had found his ghost. He found Silver.
Nice job. Now, let's do it again. No.
All right, so let's start talking about Bill's walking tour. Felt a little different, didn't it?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, it was interesting that no interaction with Pennywise. My note on there was anybody else expecting a "no, you won't" coming from the drain, you know?
Yes. He's yelling at the sewer and nothing's coming back. Why isn't the sewer talking to him at this point?
Yeah, no, it was definitely kind of a funny intro scene, right? That's basically what it opens up with. He goes to the sewer and basically is calling it out. He's calling Pennywise out and gets nothing. Which, yeah, compared to what we've seen with literally everyone else, going after Pennywise, the clown's shown up in some form. And apparently Bill doesn't get the same treatment.
Any ideas why?
Because it's fucking Bill Denbrough. He's afraid of him.
Because you don't mess with that guy.
He actually doesn't want Bill here. Everyone else he's just been trying to provoke. He actually doesn't want Bill here, because without Bill, there's no team.
Do you think Bill's the one he's truly scared of? He being Pennywise?
I think that he, being Pennywise, realizes that Bill is that commander. He brings a little something extra to the table, and he's kind of the nucleus of the group. Like, just without Bill, the group probably doesn't go forward. I think he thinks differently about Bill. I do.
So let's talk about the boy he meets on the skateboard.
He reminds me a little bit of the cabbie. I wonder if they're related. I don't know, Mike. I don't know why, but it just kind of gives off that vibe. That friendly, that you don't really see in Derry. That
you mean Dave?
Yeah, sorry, Dave.
Dave the cabbie.
Yes, Dave the cabbie. I'm sorry. I apologize. But, you don't really meet the friendly Derryite, all too often. You meet the dickheads, you meet the assholes.
I'm laughing. I'm sorry. The friendly Derryite, it's such an oxymoron.
Right?
They don't exist.
Yeah. And we actually meet two of them in this scene.
That's true.
Maybe even a third you kind of consider. But it's kind of interesting that Bill is the only one that's, I don't know, and I take that back because Ben had a good interaction with the librarian.
There are a lot of friendly Derryites, I think. Some of the parents that we've seen, Richie's parents seem decent. Mike's parents seemed decent, and I think kind of throughout you get friendly
Carol.
people.
We like Carol.
The drugstore guy who helped out getting the asthma medicine at Bill's death ride or whatever. I think they're out there. It's just easier to not focus on them.
Yeah. No, agreed. And you're right, because you always hear about the complaints over the friendly interaction. They always say that about retail work and everything like that. So the bad ones stick out way more than the good interactions.
Right. Yeah. One bad review just takes like 10 times the amount of good reviews to overcome. Kind of deal. So with that, please give us good reviews on iTunes. We really appreciate it.
I would say my teacher thing is for every one negative thing you have to say, you're supposed to make it up by 5 positives.
Yeah.
So it's like, Johnny, stop throwing the chair. I really liked that when I told you to stop throwing the chair, you put it down nicely.
You did throw it very far.
I appreciate that you picked it back up.
And it only broke off in 2 pieces. That's a good thing.
See, I always found a way around that by saying, oh, Johnny, stop throwing a chair. Billy, thank you for walking nicely. Sarah, thank you for walking nicely. Sean, thank you for sitting quietly. I didn't have to compliment that kid. I would just find everybody else. Sorry, off topic. So skateboarder dude kid, I'm not supposed to talk to strangers. You could be the serial killer. Well, I was in England. Yeah. Until yesterday.
Yeah, and then it goes on to, hey, I'll give you a quarter if you let me ride the board. It's like, not supposed to take candy or money from a stranger, but the kid's still there. It's still willing to let him take the ride.
Well, and the kid's funny. He's like, I don't need your quarter. I got $2.
I'm rich.
Right.
Yeah. I definitely liked how Bill kind of goes through this interaction of, he says, keep away from the sewers and drains, Bill said quietly. Keep away from empty places and deserted places. Stay out of train yards, but most of all, stay away from the sewers and the drains. And then he goes on to add, also stay away from the canal too, son. You follow? And the kid's like, yeah, it sounds like the kid's he's already experienced some of, Derry's underbelly, and some of his friends have as well, too. So I think it's kind of interesting that there's this mentor relationship that Bill has with this kid, and I'll have more on that later.
Yeah, and going to that point, I can totally see in my mind's eye, whatever, that the kid's face when he says, he's crazy. He's got toys in the attic for thinking that shark was in the canal. And he's like, yeah, stay away from the canal, kid. And you can just see his face go, oh, shit, you mean, really? That too? Because Bill's already told him about the voices in the drains or the talking coming from it. He's like, yeah, I've heard them too. And to have an adult in this town tell you, something that every other adult has denied, that's, definitely telling.
So I had one of my half-brain theories, as I do, about that. And I think it goes back to what we were talking about chapters and chapters and chapters ago, where Ben saw the mummy out, it was the mummy, right, out on the ice, and ran and then went home and had a snack. And Eddie escaped from the leper and then went home and watched TV. And Stan escaped from the dead boys by shouting the birds, and then he went home and continued bird watching. Because we've talked about how kids can easily roll the supernatural just into their everyday lives. I know Ben had mentioned that when he was an adult later, how it's a lot easier for kids just to accept the supernatural and incorporate it into your everyday lives and still go home and go to soccer practice and then have dinner and do your homework. Okay, I see a giant bird trying to kill me, and then I'm going to go home and do my chores. And adults have a very, very hard time of incorporating those same kinds of supernatural things. We have to find an explanation for everything, right? It's the Harry Potter thing of muggles will do anything to explain away even the simplest magic that they see. That's basically what's happening to the adults in this world. They will explain it away in any way they can. Except now we have this kid who's heard the voices. He heard voices in the sewer, went from a little kid's voice to an adult's voice. He heard crying in the bathtub. His friend saw a shark in the canal. Supernatural things. He's rolled right into his life because that's what kids do. But I think the thing for this kid, and I'm curious what happens to him later, is that he finally found an adult that verifies the reality of these things. We've never had an adult verify it to children before. And that to me was like the moment of, oh, Bill's going to do something, because he's an adult who's lived it, who forgot it, but doesn't not believe it, who is giving validity to the kids. And it just was such a moment for me of, I wonder what this kid's going to think now.
I 100% agree with what both of you are saying. And I think it is the first time that any of these kids, around town have had that confirmation of, yeah, we've seen some stuff, but we can't really talk about it to anybody. And if we do, we're laughed at or no one believes us. And you start putting that down, and guess what? People stop talking about it. And that keeps happening over time, and people stop talking about it. And then you don't talk about it, and then you refuse to talk about it because, well, if I give that any credence of, validity, then I'm an outcast, like, instantly. And nobody wants that socially. And I think it's kind of interesting also that if you think of kids as, sponges and they're rubbery, they bounce back, like Melissa was saying, but they're also very receptive to new information. So they're still learning life and all of these things, where adults tend to, in general, become more rigid and steadfast over time. And I think that is potentially a little bit of what King is getting at with this, is the adults are all rigid. And if they experience things like this, they probably snap. And, if it's too rigid, it doesn't bend, it breaks. But kids can still bend. They're still malleable. And they haven't learned at this point to not believe that that's possible. And you see it being possible and you get shut down, then you just end up becoming rigid earlier. And I really like that Bill is playing the role that he is for this kid. I think it's going to be good for all of the kids around town because word's going to get around a bit. And hey, look, the Losers Club just got a whole army of little kids to help them fight.
Yeah, very true. And sorry, I was kind of doubling back here for a note that I had going along with what the kid and Bill were talking about. And the boy admits to being friends with Johnny Fury. Mm-hmm. And Johnny Fury is the one who was found dead near Neibold Street with both his legs missing.
Okay.
And so for this kid, like you were both saying, like the resiliency of it, one of his best friends is literally ripped apart. And he's just like, yeah, he was a good guy, we used to pal around. So it's kind of one of those, just different mindsets just as a kid, I don't know where I'm kind of going with this, but, that mindset of a kid of, yeah, this is happening and I believe it, but we'll figure it out or we won't.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point there, Benj. These kids are going through some serious trauma, maybe not even directly for them, but, Johnny Fury gets his legs torn off and killed, and all of his friends are supposed to they're taught to just ignore this and that's part of living in Derry. Like, that's not healthy. That's gonna break all of the kids around. And I think that is a big part of as to what feeds into this overall social amnesia is every 27-ish years, right? They're forced to relive these things and find out that, yeah, this is just how life goes. Like, that's not good.
And God, 27 years, it's the perfect amount of time for the historical amnesia that happens. Because if it had been 15 years, then there would be enough people who were still youngish that would remember.
That generational turnover.
Right. Like, you could be 7 years old when it happened, and then when you're 22, you're still considered young enough to be able to warn and help and ward away the younger kids. But 27 years, like, you're not just like 20s adult. You're like, old, like late 30s.
Old enough that the kids won't necessarily listen to you. Even if, it's that extra,
don't listen to you.
It's that extra level of adult. Not like, oh, young adult, they're probably still hip. No, you're a true adult.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Like, you drive a minivan, adult.
You've got stick figures on your back window, adult.
You probably have a 401k.
Or two.
So, Something else I found really interesting that kind of comes up in this conversation. I feel like this conversation with the kid was really the biggest scene here. We'll get into the other really big scene here in a minute, but Bill seems to be having some flickers of his old suicidal beating the devil lifestyle where he wants to go on the skateboard, you know, and obviously we've seen the stutter come back and all of these things that make him as a kid, and the beating the devil thing seems to be coming back as well, but he's still kind of able to keep that at bay and like talks himself out of it essentially. But I think it's just the first time we've seen that part come back, and I wasn't surprised when I was like, "Oh, kid with a skateboard. Well, here goes Bill. He's gonna
like you knew
talk
it
to that kid. Like he's gonna be just pulled in to talk to him." And yeah, so I thought he was actually gonna write it. At least give it a shot. Was a little surprised.
He did the Bart Simpson at the top of the hill, kind of back and forth on the foot, and then maybe not.
See, when I reread this chapter, I really thought, like, I remembered him doing it. I was like, oh no, I guess I remembered that wrong.
Yeah.
For some reason, I thought he had, and then I'm reading, oh no, he chickened out. Good. He didn't break his hip.
I thought it was also kind of cool the way King describes Bill's, like, the way he calls himself out. He's like, the way I was, like, kind of leerily standing on it, it was a lot like, you know, someone's first time out on skis on the bunny hills where their knees are already bent and mentally they've already fallen over. Like, it's like that hesitance. Like, I can get that feeling. It's like, this is new. Which means you're in bad posture. Like, the easiest thing to do is relax and just go with it.
Yes.
But put me on rollerblades right now. See how duck-footed I look.
But that natural tendency to be rigid because you're just tensed up. I think King captured that very, very well.
Exactly.
That happened to me the other day when I tried to ride my daughter's bike, and I haven't ridden a bike in probably 20 years. And I like pedaled once and I was like, nope, I'm getting off. Nope. Putting the bike away. Really sorry. Won't do
Bill
that
has
again.
a moment like that coming up too.
Speaking of bikes, let's talk about the little girl and secondhand Rose and secondhand clothes.
Well, I do have one note before we get to her, if that's okay. Because when Bill's walking, he passes the old house, and he's like,
Yeah.
I can go in, and I don't want to be that weird guy of knocking on the door. There's a family lives there.
Yeah, Bev.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Yeah, exactly. But I'm saving this note for this part because he passes on. But you ever wonder what it's like to go back to your childhood home and just see what it's at now, how it's been taken care of? You know, just...
Yeah, my brother lives in it.
I know.
I literally just
How's the
started
house,
looking.
Luke?
The house is doing well. There's a couple studios.
Not
There's a
quite
suit
as
of
many
armor.
bedrooms.
It's doing well.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I saved it for this one because the last chapter was a little too dark for it.
Yeah, it's a little less.
I
like
would
that.
say overall, this section was not so dark.
No, not at all.
I did think it was interesting when he goes by the house, he sees two little boys. They're playing badminton out in the yard, and a mom out in the front yard with like a newborn. And I was like, because I always look at numbers when they're put out, I was like, the boys are 8 and 10. They're right in that, you know, for lack of a better term, kill age for Pennywise.
The dead zone.
Dead zone, yeah. Target area. And
I see what you did there.
yeah. And then I was like, because really I was trying to think of parallels between Georgie and Bill with the kids. And with there being 3 boys, it didn't quite work out, but I think there's still potential for those kids at least being mentioned again at some point. So
Yeah, and who's to say that had Georgie not died, there wouldn't have been a third?
well, but they were still more than 2 years apart. These boys were 10 and 8.
True.
That's where I was like, maybe like the 8 and because they were closer to 5 or 6 years apart.
It was like 6 and 10.
Okay, so 4, yeah. Okay.
Mhm, roughly. Maybe 5 and 10, but yeah, somewhere in there.
Yeah, but either way, that was where my mind quickly jumped to of, what kind of hidden parallels are there here? I didn't quite catch any, but anyway,
It's just kids
yeah,
that could die.
they're, yep.
And really, this chapter was full of them because he saw those kids. He saw the kid on the skateboard. He saw the little girl. Hey, what's your favorite place to shop? For me or for anybody?
Yeah.
So there's lots of kids. And I feel like none of the other losers interacted with kids.
No.
Like,
Eddie
Ben
was around
close.
kids, like at the very end.
Eddie? Oh, yeah, he ran into a group of kids.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Ben saw them at the children's library, but like no good interactions with kids. to be
Actually, I
able to
think all of
connect.
them, because I think even Bev saw some kids,
Mhm.
because one of them called,
And I know,
Richie.
Richie
There was
had
a
the
little
baby
kid.
who was
Yeah.
crying, but But I mean, they didn't interact with them. They were just like observers of the crazy.
Right. They all cognitively thought about the kids, at least at
Yes.
some point, though, which is, I think, what Benji was getting at.
Yeah. So, no, I mean, but that's a good point out, or Melissa, that, they didn't interact, and Bill's the only one that did, and Bill didn't have any Pennywise interaction.
I'm just thankful that King, because they were really supposed to be like going on instinct and trying to get back in touch with their inner kid. I'm glad that Bill didn't have the same kind of reaction as we've seen now 4 different times, that his way of getting in touch with inner kids was to talk to kids.
Yeah.
Like, not that he went off thinking that, but that's what he did. And I thought that was pretty.
No, agreed. And it also brought him back to being a leader, too, of telling the first skateboard kid, hey, stay away from the canal, stay away from the drains, stay away from the standpipe. You know, be in that leader role to the kids.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Absolutely.
So you want to talk about the secondhand rose, secondhand clothes?
Yeah, definitely.
I love the name of that store. I'm just going to start there. I love the name of the store. And for me, I automatically start pulling up all my Stephen King references because it stands out so much in my head. And I get such a sense of his book from Rose Matter, which is not set in Derry. So it's not that particular store, but a secondhand store figures prominently into that. So I searched the name, and this store also appears in the book Insomnia, which is also set in Derry, which is a fantastic book. So there's that.
Knowing how much King focuses on nostalgia and all sorts of old brand names and older technologies, he's been doing it since literally the first freaking paragraph of the book. I mean, Georgie's chapter, he's constantly doing this. And right when I saw we were going to a secondhand shop, I was like, well, here comes a whole bevy of, items that he just wants to talk about that are old, that people don't think about, but someone who can connect with. It's like, oh man, I totally remember having, the TVs that looked like that, or, like whatever else is in there. And he just does such a good job with that. And he's really consistent about actually getting the feel for that's really what you would find there. Yeah.
And to piggyback off of that comment, he adds in so much current pop culture that now reading it makes me nostalgic for the 1985 stuff. Like, I forget, there was something that was on the TV. I want to say it was like Price is Right, or something like a game show on the TV blaring through, or the radio, or talking about, hey, it's Leave the Beaver, which was always on reruns back in like early 80s. I watched the hell out of it, and so it made me nostalgia for 80s nostalgia of the 50s, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Brady Bunch.
Yeah, Brady Bunch. Thank you. That's what it was. So, my note to this was, currently, now there's not really that secondhand store. Like, you have the thrift stores, you have the Goodwills, that kind of stuff, but you don't have like the hole in the wall kind of mom and pop style, thrift store places, the quaint, it's all, because it all became trendy. So they went to big box store style places. You don't have those cool, because it's not sustainable let's be honest, but
it's hard to get items.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's hard to get items, and then what people think they're worth when they're selling to you, they're not leaving any kind of profit or anything like that, because people have gotten smarter about the nostalgia and the trendiness of the old stuff.
Well, plus in like clothes and stuff, there are so many secondhand stores, like good secondhand stores that have high quality stuff, like Plato's Closet, and you've got Red Racks, and there's even a website called ThreadUp that you can go online and buy really nice used things. So, you can get secondhand things, but you're right. It's not like I'm just going to go walking down a main street and the store here is like a really cool, musty, shadowy place.
I guess unless
maybe
you
a pawn shop.
Yeah, I was gonna say a pawn shop. Like, you can find the old. There's still some record stores and like in the trendy areas and stuff like that, but you don't get the everything kind of store like this is.
Right, with the barbershop pole.
Yeah,
I think in smaller towns you do. I think you get that in more rural, like larger towns and rural areas. Okay. I get a feeling in some towns that I know pretty well out, in rural Missouri, where I feel like there's one, maybe even two of those types of shops, just because people are there and they're not going to go and ship it all. It's just easier to be like, hey, I'll sell this to you for $40. I feel like that thing still happens in those, but yeah, in more trendier or larger cities.
Metropolitan.
It's most likely going to be swallowed up by other things filling that niche.
That's fair.
So Bill's talking to the shopkeeper and really starts struggling, right? Let's talk about that a little bit.
All right. Well, he starts struggling because as soon as he walks into the store, he starts hearing this refrain in his head. He thrusts his fist against the post and still insists he sees the ghost. That line sticks with me because I know you're an audiobooker, Luke, and the way it's read over and over and over again, that one just sticks with me because, again, as a kid went to speech class, I had those kind of tongue twisters given to you, and sorry to spoil for next episode, but those kind of things given to you that you have to just keep saying over and over, and it just gets stuck in your head, but the way it's done on the audiobook is so well. And yeah, it was almost, I had to pull out my earbuds listening to it because it kept going over and over again. It's like, I just want to hear what Bill's trying to say. And so I can only imagine in your own head hearing that.
I was going to say, that's actually really well done by King because it gets in your head just like it gets in Bill's head. He can't shake it. He just literally keeps coming back to it, and it's supposed to be distracting. And so it's funny that you kind of had that effect on you while you were listening along. It's like, God damn it, just stop it, which is where Bill gets with it. I think that's hilarious.
Yeah.
So he gets Silver. So I guess like I said, he saw a ghost, but not Pennywise. And I'm very excited he got Silver. But the thing that really struck me, which is going to be so weird, is that when he bought Silver, the shopkeeper scribbled a bill of sale that the receipt was on like a pad of paper and he wrote it out. It was just, and not that King meant that as any kind of commentary on the town. It's just that life is so different now with everything's computerized, and even like there's no ticker tape, there's no cash register. Like it's just, I'm going to write chapter. Right. Oh, traveler's check. Right. No. I want to say I was probably 11 years old and I went with our aunt to the bank to get some because we were going on a vacation.
Yeah.
And that was a long time ago. That was, hold on, I can do this, 27 and a half years ago.
Oh.
See, because that's when I was 11.
Oh man, it's all making sense.
Because I'm really the age of the characters.
Yeah.
Like I'm old. All the old things are me. It's okay. But I forgot about that. The handwritten receipts.
Yeah. And as a guy who worked in retail for quite some time in my younger days, it always sucked having to do the handwritten receipts if the computer went out. The computer went out, you're like, oh dear, I'm like, I'm not on the register because you both know my handwriting. That ain't happening. You're on the register, I'm checking crap, or I'm doing the math for the totals. Somebody else write that damn thing out.
My final thought on this chapter here, Bill faking having a kid when he gets the bike.
Mm-hmm.
I immediately thought of Ben when he was getting his library card, that, he was using it as kind of a stall technique of, it just had a very similar feel to it. And, I don't really have any other thought of it other than I just had some parallels between their characters using a kid when neither of them actually have kids, and the story's all about kids. I just thought that was kind of something that stood out to me.
Thank you for mentioning. All right, we're going to move on to our section called Questions for the Group. Benj, it looks like you've got one for us.
Yeah, this is just kind of because I couldn't come up with anything good for, story-wise. So, what's the best thrift store / secondhand store purchase you've ever gotten or made? If you've ever actually made one.
Nobody talk all at once.
Well, I can start with mine.
Benj, why don't you start with yours while
I think that sounds like a grand idea.
While I'm trying to think.
All right, so I have two. First one was a guitar. It was just this piece of junk little electric guitar that actually didn't even work, and the secondhand guy was like, he knew nothing about it. It was like one of the Goodwill stores, and like, here, we'll sell it to you for $5. Literally had to put one piece on it, solder one piece together, sold that thing off for $120. I was like, all right, cool. The other one is my coffee table. When I bought my house at 18 years old, I had no furniture, no nothing. I literally moved over here in one carload of stuff. And so went to the thrift store, found this coffee table for $6, and 17 years later, it's still sitting in my living room, sturdy as an ox. So I'm going with those.
I have nothing.
I really can't think of anything specifically. I mean, I definitely buy a lot of, like, buy it used, like, online. Like I'm gonna go with N64 games. I've bought a lot of really good Nintendo 64 games, and I'm gonna call it both Zelda Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask gold cartridges.
Yes.
I bought both of those secondhand in the last year. I am very happy with those.
I feel like you need to loan me those so I can play that over here with my kids.
Okay. You can play
Done.
it on the podcast that Rolls Plays and Games. There you go.
Excellent. That might be what we do for Christmas break.
That sounds perfect. It's a great family game.
It is a great family game. I remember sitting and like navigating you through one of those.
Yeah. That was
Probably
Wind
Ocarina.
Waker.
That's right. Yeah, it was
that was
60,
awesome.
or it was the GameCube.
Hell yeah.
Yep.
Sailing all over the place.
And with that, I'm going to move on because I have no purchase unless it was probably like costumes for a show I was directing back in high school. That's
There you go.
Probably all I got. All right, now we have questions and comments from the new reader. So, Luke, you have thoughts this time.
I do. Well, as I was taking notes, I was like, I'm going to try to actually put stuff down here and not use them as actual notes. So,
All right.
my first thought here is Bill's mentorship interaction with the skateboard kid makes me wonder if there isn't going to be some kind of adult, maybe even from like a previous quote unquote it fighting club. That we're going to see give one of the 1958 kids some similar advice. We've seen this very cyclical thing, and I feel like that group already knows a lot of this just from first-hand experience, but I do feel like there was probably a group before our losers group that they're in a similar defense mode team, and so it just makes me think that maybe we'll see somebody similar to what Bill is doing, like, hey, like either confirming or, you know, like, hey, do this, which also makes me think that these kids, that the skateboard kid could be one of the current group that's actually responsible, even though it's a little odd because the former group is still alive and are back. I think that's part of what's very much not normal, is that original group coming back again.
But you know what? Oh, go ahead.
I was going to just say really quick on that, going along with your theory, maybe it's like Final Destination style of, since Stan's gone, now Skateboard Kid has been promoted, like he's first, you know, so just...
Well, I was going to say, you know what the first rule of the it fighting group is? You don't talk about the it fighting group.
No, apparently it's you make sure that at least one kid from the next group has the information.
That's true.
Yeah, Mike got it from his dad.
See?
Maybe it was Mike's dad.
Well, we already know, Shining.
Yes, with you. That guy.
Yeah. So that whole connection there.
Mm-hmm. All right, Luke, what else you got?
My other thought is it is definitely interesting that Pennywise does not outright appear to or approach Bill. I think the speech, the refrain that Benji was referencing is somewhat of a mental interaction that I believe Pennywise was involved in, and also the drawing him to find Silver so easily. That seemed a little convenient, that the bike is literally sitting there waiting for him, and it's right out front. You're not gonna miss it. It's basically like, hey, here's a fucking spotlight for you. Exactly. And it's just odd to me that it's so different for Bill compared to the other ones. It's almost like Pennywise is giving Bill just enough to prove that he's there, but he doesn't need to show himself like he did for the others, because Bill kind of outright believes anyway, if that makes sense. He didn't need any convincing. He knows. And I think Pennywise knows that he knows, and now they all know.
Now we come to a section called My Favorite Thing. Ben, what was your favorite thing in this chapter?
As I said before, that refrain just going on and on and on in his head, in my ears. He thrusts his fist against the post and still insists he sees the ghost. So creepy, so just kind of, what does that mean? You know, kind of thing. It's very interesting, you know, very, very interesting and very just, I don't know, creepy. And you know me and the creepy.
Luke, how about you?
Bill the Mentor. I liked his whole interaction with Skateboard Kid, and kind of as I got into my comments from the new reader section, the new ideas I've had about maybe confirming or thinking more about the cyclical nature of this It fighting group. That was my favorite thing this chapter.
And my favorite thing was an actual line. And the kid says to Bill, "You always talk in the sewers, mister? Only in Derry."
Yeah, I like that they both hesitate and then start cracking up, and both of them just get it.
Yep, because it's funny, but also really, really, really not. And we are done. So that takes us to the time where I tell you where you're supposed to find us on a lot of places, like Twitter at Floats Down Here, and you can email us at floatsdownhere@gmail.com, and we have a website called thepodcastthat.com where you can subscribe and rate to us on iTunes, but you hear that all the time, so do them anyway.
Check out our Patreon at patreon.com/stayimaginary. You can join for $1, $3, $7, other tiers as well. And if we had another host from Drinks and Knows Things here, he'd list them off very rapid succession, and it'd be very funny. But I'm not that funny. And we have a lot of cool things on there, like you can get our show notes, like what we're working on right now. You can have access to bonus content that we're going to start producing here as well, specifically for Floats Down Here. We also have merchandise club that's really, really cool, and a seasonal t-shirt clothing club as well for branded The Podcast That shows items. So check that out. Patreon.com/stayimaginary.
Join us next time as we discuss chapter number 11, Walking Tours, part 6. Mike Hanlon makes a connection.
You'll float too.
Stay imaginary.
Thanks.